Alright, so if your battery light came on in your car, it's most likely a problem with the charging system. We're just going to do a quick diagnosis here. A couple things to look at. First thing to do is, if you've got a digital voltmeter, set it to DC. And then I'm just gonna stick this in here on this side. Get that in there real good. And measuring 12 volts without the car started. Now we're going to start it up. I'm going to do this again, and I should be getting well over 12. Even with lights and other things on, it should be at least 12 and a half to charge. And you'll see here, maybe it'll start dropping. Yeah, it's not doing it for me. It was doing it earlier when I was testing it, but you see that it'll keep dropping. The other thing that you can do is you can keep the lead here, or keep the ground here, and with it running, come down here to the back of your alternator, take that cover off right there, and put your positive lead on there, and then touch ground, either the engine or the negative terminal on the battery. If you're not getting more than the 12 volts there, you definitely aren't charging. One last thing to try to check though, if you are having a charging problem, there's two things I guess I should point out. There's an alternator fuse right here on a 2006, I think, through 2008 Hyundai Sonata, the V6. That right there will be blown. You can see mine is good. The other thing to check would be just your belt tension. Make sure your belts are tight and not worn out. If that slips, you won't get a good charge either. So one last thing, just going to go through the tools that I used real quick. I used a breaker bar with two 12-inch extensions. This is the 3/4 I use for taking off the tires, so as much as anything I have that for taking off the wheel. 10 millimeter, 13 millimeter, also has a 15 on this end, box end. This is the one I use just for prying the alternator out. So I've got an 8 millimeter, 10 millimeter, 12 millimeter, 14 millimeter. This is another, this is my 10-inch or 10 millimeter driver. I had both a 1/4 inch and a 3/8. The 3/8 I pretty much just used with the 1/4 inch extension because I just had those little guys. Always helps to have a straight screwdriver. Phillips to get off some of the stuff on the radiator or the fan. Pair of channel locks for removing the hose, and then had these guys I use for pulling that plug on the back. So having a good shop light doesn't hurt, and then having a printout of how the belt goes, always helpful to have too if you don't have the book handy. So that's it. That's the tool I got. Hopefully you have all those. The big one, having that breaker bar with the extensions. I always use working on the car as an excuse to buy more tools, and I always tell my wife I have to have them, otherwise I can't do the job. So not a whole lot of expensive tools here, but tools you need to have to do this job. Alright, today we're going to be working on replacing an alternator in a 2006 Hyundai Sonata with the V6. As you can see, I've already removed the fancy shroud that covers the engine. I'm going to start by taking off the serpentine belt. That'll help. We're going to have to remove some of the front end stuff. We're going to have to disconnect the battery. But I found the easiest way to get this started is actually by removing the wheel and getting in through the wheel housing. So we're going to start with that. So the biggest reason that I like to take off the wheel shroud is just not enough room down here for my big hands to get down there and take off the lower bolts that hold on the alternator. The upper bolt is pretty easy to access. There's the back side right there. Front side of it is right there. It's not too bad to get to, but the other ones are a little tougher to get to down below. Plus, you can see there's very little room in there to get the tensioner off. So, by taking off the wheel, we're now going to take off that shroud cover there to get easier access. You can see I did this a year ago. I actually drilled a hole right there to do this because I couldn't figure out how to get this cover off. I did this in February when it was covered with snow, and very hard to tell how to get it off. Since then, I've actually figured out where the bolts are. They're actually underneath down here. I'll show you where those are. don't even see them now. They're down in here to get that shroud completely off. And once you figure that out, oh, I'm sorry, they're actually up here underneath this lip. So you can see there's that lip that actually up in there, and that's why I couldn't see them, because I had a little stuff caked on it last year. Before I get too far, I should mention here that I do have this up on a jack, and I put a jack stand in there because you are going to be kind of working in here underneath, and you'd hate to have anything fall on you. So just want to point out these screws again. There are 3 of them that hold this stupid little plastic thing on. There's one right here, one right here. There's another one down in here that right in here that I think I already either didn't put on last year because I think it's silly to have 3 big bolts holding on this little flimsy piece. But just wanted to point that out because, like I said, here in a second when I get that out, you're going to see how much more room that gives us to work. You can see now I've got the that cover removed. Just going to look in here. Right here, this is the tensioner, and you can see it here. That little knob right there, that's what we're going to have to put a socket on to twist to get the serpentine belt loose. So it's metric. I'm going to use a 3/4. That seems to fit pretty good. It's right around that. Otherwise I think that would be a 15 millimeter ish. And I'm going to show you that here in a second. So I've got my 3/4 on there. It is a 15, I believe. The only one I had though was a long socket, and with that pipe right there, I couldn't get it in. So using the 3/4, a couple longer extensions, and then my breaker bar, and I'm going to twist that up. I'm going to have to use 2 hands. I'm going to have to hold it right here to twist, and that's going to loosen the belt, and I'm going to pop the belt off there. Alright, so all I did was I just twisted that, kind of held my, once I got it twisted, holding the corner, I used my body to kind of hold the socket in there and just reached in right on the flywheel there and loosened it up and pulled it off. So now it's loose, the arm is all extended out, and now we can go up top and start taking stuff off. So one of the biggest problems I had last time doing this was, you can see how tight this is down in there, was getting it pulled up and out. So I'm going to remove this, the top tube, return tube for the radiator. I'm going to remove the cooling fan, which is just a couple screws. We're going to take this guy off. That's just a couple clips on the top for the air inlet. We got to disconnect this pipe here. We can leave it over here, I think. We may just have to loosen that up to twist this around. And then we're going to start taking off the electric. It all goes down in here. And then when we get all that off, I'll show you again. You can see I just pulled that off with a set of channel locks. That came off pretty easy. One thing I just wanted to point out, on Hyundais and almost all foreign cars, almost all of these smaller bolts that are everywhere are all 10 millimeter. So it's worth investing in, you know, every size socket that you can in 10 millimeter. And in this case, I've just got this little preset screwdriver thing that's a 10 millimeter. Just makes real easy work of taking off all these excessive bolts. And just a quick bit of warning. See, I pulled this back. If your hose is cracked at all, you definitely don't want to do this, or you may need to replace that. That hose does have coolant in it, and you can see, I thought I was going to be smart and take it off. There wasn't a lot of coolant in it, but I opened it up, and now I've got coolant everywhere, and I'm going to have to clean a puddle up. I'm just going to show you real quick. That guy comes off. It just connects right there. You'll see that. One thing I should note, I have not taken the battery off yet. I should have done that earlier. Anytime you're working on a car, you should always disconnect the battery. Probably one of the first things if you're working on anything, you're going to be unplugging and things. So I'm going to do that now. Just disconnect here and right in there. Get those terminals off, that way I don't short something out messing around up here. So just want to show you I am being a good boy, and I did disconnect the battery. So I'm going to take out the fan here. Just want to show you this real quick. There's a 10 millimeter here, 10 millimeter here, a couple screws for this little plastic shroud that covers the radiator, and then down below, down there kind of by the alternator, there's a little clip. It's kind of hard to see right in the center. There's one of those on both sides that kind of clips in, so you're just going to have to kind of release those down there behind those hoses. And then disconnecting this power coupling. It's really important to be careful with those because you don't want to have to replace a power coupling like that. So there's just push button release. Make sure you get it, push it down really good, pull them apart. Sometimes they'll stick a little bit with a little bit of suction. You can see now with the fan out, I've got it over here on the floor. There's a lot more room to work in here. This connector, just a push button on the back. This whole thing will actually lift up, so it's not too hard to get that loose. You can see these clips a little bit better now down in there. The clip there, clip there. With all this room now, it's going to be much more easier to work back in here. I've got big hands. Even found a flashlight down in there that evidently I lost one of the last times I worked on this. So you can see this was actually a new alternator put on a year ago, but still ended up failing. Not sure if it's because of the oil leak that sometimes the head has and drips on right down there on the alternator. So one thing I just wanted to point out. So the other thing you want to always have is 13 millimeter. This is a 13 millimeter on here. I'm going to put something along the radiator here because the worst thing I want to do is smack off here and damage the radiator. So I'm just going to put a piece of cardboard in here, just something to kind of protect it to keep me from bending the fins. Now that I got that, have that disconnected, we want to get all this wiring out. So I took a couple 10 millimeters out here, I took a 10 millimeter out here. We're just going to work all of this wiring basically out of our way. This is just there's another little guy down there with a little bitty thing on there, bracketed on there. So we're going to take that bracket off right there, and then we should be able to get all this, disconnect this guy. Alright, moving on. This little guy right here, that little clip ended up being an 8 millimeter. Just be really careful when you take that off because you don't want to lose that little nut. This ended up being a little bit of a pain to pull out. You have to really squeeze right there. So I ended up using just a small set of channel locks, gripping it really good, and just pulling it came right out. Where I struggled with using my hand because I just couldn't get a pinch and go. So I took off these, took off that bracket, and then took off this bracket up here. It's just going to allow me to move all this kind of stuff as far over this way as I can. So I still got something hooked down here below, so I got to figure out where that's going and get that loosened up as well. All right, just wanted to show you that, and I'll show you taking off the alternator next. So you can see this top one is actually pretty easy and pretty accessible. It's just a 14 millimeter head on there. It goes straight through to this bolt on the back, which I don't remember if we got to hold that or not. We're just getting it torqued loose right now. The only thing is there's not a lot of room in there, as you can see. That hose right there, the crossover hose for the AC. Luckily it's padded, but you just got to slowly work it out and get that bolt out of there. So I don't know if you noticed a second ago I still have that wiring harness in there. I've got the nut or the bolt out all the way through there. That wiring harness is connected to the AC compressor that's down on the bottom of that down there. And you can see this guy. I'm going to shine a light on it here. It's a little push button. Oops, where'd it go? A little bitty push button in there. And you can reach out down there and get it with your finger. You don't actually have to push that hard and pull it out. This connector comes out pretty easy, but man, that's a little bitty hole right there to get my big fingers in. Alright, remember earlier when I said there's a reason we took off the wheel well? So the bottom bolt for this is down in between all those pulleys and everything. And there is no way to get down to that thing and do any work. But, look at this. That bolt is right here. See how much more room we got to work on it? So that's going to be really easy to get from right here. Take me just a couple minutes to get that loose. I also know that I don't have to take that bolt all the way out from down here because that is actually just a rod sitting in a channel. So all I have to do is really get that loosened up. The whole thing should tilt forward. Hardest part is going to be getting this thing pulled out. Alright. So you can see now I got that bottom one loose. This will just rock right in there. So I know for a fact, like I said, that that's just basically sitting in a channel. So there's the bolt going across, but it's not a hard piece. It's just kind of hooked over a lip. So I'm just going to kind of work that, manhandle it out. Like I said, getting it out of here is probably the hardest thing. I may actually have to move the dipstick there to just get enough room to squeeze it through here. So we might have to loosen up the dipstick. That's just another 10 millimeter right there. So I saw somebody do this online, just because it's kind of hard to get down in there and rock this thing back and forth to get it out. All I did was take the bolt, now once it's pulled out of here, down, put the bolt back in. I had to kind of lift this pipe up from the AC to get it in there, but I got it back in there, screwed it all the way in so I don't mess up any of the threads. Just put a bigger box end wrench on here, and what this is going to allow me to do then is have something that I can really kind of, you know, rock it back and forth, really kind of move it around back in there and be able to kind of pull on it to get it out of there. So just gives me a little something else to grab onto and get it worked out of there. All right, you can see that guy popped right out. I took out the bolt again now, right there. All right, now I'm just going to try to work it up through here. I think I'm going to go ahead and move that 10 millimeter on the dipstick just so that thing's a little flexible and a little less rigid in there. All right, hopefully you can see that slot down in there now. See, there's a ton of oil in here. I'm going to try to wipe some of this up just to get it out of there. Definitely from the leak that we talked about earlier, from the heads. It looks like it leaks right down in there. Big problem with these Sonatas. It was a recall at one point, but I never had it done during the recall period, and now I'm stuck either having it done for, I think they said $2,300 at the dealership, because I'm not taking off the heads myself. Because it's not just the covers, it's the actual heads that leak, from what I understand. So that's a lot of work, a lot of torque specs that I don't want to mess with on an aluminum engine. So for now, I'm going to replace a $100 and some odd alternator. I'm going to try to take it back and see if they'll do it under warranty. If not, I'll just be buying a new one. All right, see, I got the alternator out. I'm going to show you real quick though how I did this, because basically pulled it pretty much, I turned it around and pulled it pretty much straight like that up. Taking the dipstick off was necessary because I just let that move around just a little bit. I lied though, that's a 12 millimeter. Holding that on there because, you know, such a heavy duty piece, it needs a big bolt. Why, I don't know. Anyway, I don't know if you can see now down in there, kind of dark down in there, but you can see that slot that it sits in. You can see I still have that bottom bolt on there. All I did was loosen it up because it just rests down in there. Let me get in there and wipe that off so you can see that. So I'm back in the auto parts store, Advanced Auto Parts. Limited lifetime warranty. What they'll do is they'll give you one replacement, just no questions asked. So I took it in, showed them my paperwork from last year. They replaced it, no problems. So I've got a brand new reman alternator that I'm going to put in here in a minute, reverse of what I did before. So for the reinstall process, we're just going to reverse everything. First thing I'm going to do though is I'm going to replace the serpentine belt while we're doing this. So I'm going to work to get this out, and then you want to make sure that you find the schematic, which, nope, that's vacuum hoses. Usually there's one right on the vehicle that shows you. If not, it's in the book. It'll show you the way the routing for the serpentine belt goes. But I'm going to get that replaced first before I get this put back in there. And we'll go from there. Alright, so at this point, I've worked my new serpentine belt in there. I did have to take a break because I left the book at home and I'm working at a friend's garage. But I did have my computer here. Went upstairs, printed out a copy of the belt diagram, which you can see here. So I have it roughly like that. Obviously we've got to get the alternator in before we can totally route it. But just wanted to get it roughly there without the alternator. Right, smarter way to work. Went ahead and ran this down. So it's tight, but not all the way in. So it's still finger tight. This will make it so that once we just slide it in there, we'll just tighten that guy up and we'll be good to go. So make sure you put that in there first. Don't make my mistake. All right. So we're going to go back in the way we came out, which should look like this. You just got to kind of squeeze it through there, making sure we don't hit down below. I'm actually going to stop filming, but basically this is the way you go in, and I'll show you again in a second, just so I can use both hands. Alright, I got to work back down in there. See the alternator sitting down in there. Just want to show you, there's that channel again. See my bolt? So all I have to do is basically just sit it in there, tilt it up, and drop the bolt through this other thing here. So we're just going to go ahead and get this tied back on. I'll drop down to a 1/4 inch just to get it in here. That AC tubes right there just really gets in the way for this stuff. So just going to tighten that up, then we'll go underneath and tighten up that bottom one right there. Route the AC, or the serpentine belt again, and then we'll start hooking up some electric. Alright, you can see we got the serpentine belt tightened back up. Same thing, just through the wheel well here. Took my long extensions, went in there, just turned this, that released the tension. Doesn't hurt to have a second person to do this, because you got to make sure that all those little grooves on that belt are in every one of these pulleys that has that. Because if it's out at all, it's going to make it that much harder to get wrapped around everything. And then I actually had to work because it had popped off the top of the tensioner just a little bit. So I had to hold this down through the wheel well, get back up here on the top, and just get it pulled back over that tensioner, because it was on, but it wasn't on there straight, and if I started this up, that belt would have come flying right off. Alright, so we're back up here on the top. I'm just going to basically start hooking my wiring harness back in place. I'm going to put my 12mm back in here. Then I'll put each one of these brackets back on where they belong. Get this AC compressor plug back down underneath here. You can feel it. You can stick your finger right there, so it's not too hard to reach and line up. Get all that on, and then we'll work on plugging in this stud. And don't forget this little guy. This new one came with a nut on there, so I took that off before I started. Remember, that's that little bitty 8mm. Alright, I have all those guys in place. I showed you this earlier. I had unsnapped this little guy right there. This is actually the positive side for the battery. That's where it comes off the alternator. I had unsnapped that, moved that over here out of the way, so the rest of this wiring harness wasn't really a big problem. So we can just snap this guy back in place. There's that push button I was telling you about. That's just hard to get in there. So get that plugged in. Reach underneath here. Get this AC one plugged in. Didn't seem that far down there before. Where's it at? Alright, I'm going to stop this so I can use both. Basically, it's underneath there. Alright, I've got our little 8mm tightened back up for this clip. Got this routed, got that wire routed down there. It's not hard to get on there, you just got to feel it with your hand, and then it's a little tough to get the buttons on the bottom. That's the thing to remember. Snap this in here, and then this just sits on here right there. So it's just basically sits on there, kind of like this is sitting over here. Alright, I'm just going to tighten this back up with a 13mm. Alright, got that tightened up. Do not forget to put that little lock washer in there before you put this nut on. I used a box end wrench to put this on here. It was just a little hard getting a ratchet in there, so just use the box end wrench. Got it finger tight as far as I could, and then just tightened it down. Make sure you snap this little waterproof cover on there, and that's basically got the alternator back in place. So now we just got to put in the cooling fan, put our radiator hose back, and our air intake, and we're going to put in that panel back in the wheel well and get the wheel back on. Alright, I'm pretty much done buttoning everything up on top. Got the fan back in place, got the air intake back in place. One thing I should note, this nut right here, this little plastic trim piece, that bolt goes through there. So definitely make sure you put this plastic trim piece on before you put that bolt in. Down here I got this in place. It looks like I must have had a clip break at some point. That fan plug should be down there. I'm just going to do one last check, make sure everything electrical that I disconnected, my plug's there connected. Make sure anything here, always good to double check, make sure everything's connected before you hook up the battery again. So then we're just going to hook up the ground first, then hook up the power. So So one thing I always make sure that I do when hooking up a battery is just really make sure these guys are tight, because you don't want any corrosion to get in there. See, I hand tightened this with the driver and it's still moving around, so I'm just going to make sure that that is as tight as it can be. Keep any corrosion, or as much corrosion out of there as we can. Make sure we always have a good charge and good connection in there, especially in these in cold New England winters. Alternator, and now we're getting 13.7 volts with some of the accessories on inside, so we're definitely charging. That's it, you've got a new alternator.